Hello there, and welcome to the latest edition in my series, How to Run Cyberpunk Red. We're still on the character creation process, and this video focuses on how your character gets their starting weapons and armor during that process. The dystopian future of Cyberpunk Red, specifically in Night City, is one where it's not a question of if a fight is going to break out, it's a question of when a fight is going to break out. The time of the Red is one of privation and slow recovery from the nightmare of the Fourth Corporate War. Entire sections of Night City are referred to as combat zones, where gangs and other violent factions vie for control with little to no oversight from the city's police department. Even the neighborhoods that have some kind of security presence can be dangerous at times. In Cyberpunk Red, it's expected that everyone is going to be carrying some kind of weaponry either on their person or in their body in the form of cybernetics. Only a fool would walk around without some kind of protection. Starting on page 91 of the core rulebook, there's a link to TTRPG in the description below if you want to get your own copy. You'll get a brief description of the types of weapons available. Weapons are broken down into three categories: melee, swords, hammers, clubs, etc., ranged, guns, bows, crossbows, and the like, and exotic, melee and ranged weapons that don't quite fit the other categories or have some kind of specialized quality to them. With melee weapons, there's a chart on page 91 that covers the terms you'll see for each type of weapon. There are weapon classifications, examples of a type of weapon that fits that classification, the number of hands required to wield the weapon, how much damage a single attack does, the rate of fire, how often you can swing the weapon in a combat round, concealment, and lastly, cost. There are four types for melee: light melee weapon, medium melee weapon, heavy melee weapon, and very heavy melee weapon. You'll notice that these types are intentionally vague, particularly compared to the massive variety of weapons that could be found in Cyberpunk 2020. This is by design, since a more generic label fits the setting of the time of the Red. This also allows GMs to come up with their own brand names or weapon names to fit their setting. Light melee weapons are generally going to be one-handed weapons, like a knife or a tomahawk. The rate of fire will be 2, meaning a character can swing the weapon twice in a given combat round, and the weapon will only deal 1d6, one six-sided dice, for damage. The biggest perk of light melee weapons is they are the only category that is concealable by default. Medium melee weapons are things like baseball bats or a machete. These weapons will tend to be one-handed, but they can be wielded with both hands. Their rate of fire is 2, and they inflict 2d6 damage per successful attack. Medium melee weapons are not concealable, but that may be possible if your group has a tech who can make modifications to items. Heavy melee weapons are where we start getting into the bigger, showy weapons like lead pipes, various types of swords, etc. Heavy melee weapons are typically going to be two-handed weapons unless your character has a high body stat and potentially cybernetic enhancements that allow for wielding bigger weapons single-handedly. The rate of fire for heavy melee weapons is still 2, making them fairly handy, especially since they inflict 3d6 damage on a successful attack. Like the previous category, heavy melee weapons are not concealable without modification. The last category, very heavy melee weapons, are for those types of insane weapons that you tend to find in science fiction and fantasy stories. We're talking sledgehammers, blades made from helicopter rotors, or exotic weapons like a naginata. Very heavy melee weapons are almost certainly going to be two-handed weapons outside of special circumstances like someone being heavily modified by cybernetics, or possibly a full cyborg. The rate of fire for this category drops to 1 attack per round, but the damage output increases to 4d6, meaning when your attack hits, it has the potential to do some serious damage. Obviously, these weapons are not going to be concealable, even with significant modifications by a tech. The prices for each category are set, and I'll go over the economy of Cyberpunk Red in a future video. The main currency for Cyberpunk Red is the Eurobuck, styled as EB in the core rulebook and normally referred to as eddies in the setting. Light melee weapons and medium melee weapons will set your edge runner back 50 Eurobucks. Heavy melee weapons cost 100 Eurobucks, and very heavy melee weapons will set your character back 500 Eurobucks. Due to the nature of the economy in the time of the Red, anything that costs more than 100 Eurobucks cannot be bought off of the street directly. Instead, your character will either have to reach out to a fixer to source the item, or they'll have to attend a night market. I'll cover those in an episode where I discuss the economy of Cyberpunk Red. Before diving into the ranged weapons though, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button as well as the bell icon to get notifications when I drop new content. Liking and subscribing helps out small creators like me immensely. You'll also find my link tree in the comments below that has links to all of my stuff on the web, including my social media accounts, my Patreon, and my book series, The Atalante Chronicles. Definitely check those out if you have the time and you want to show your support. And if you have any questions regarding Cyberpunk Red, drop a comment below. Thanks for indulging this shameless self-promotion. Ranged weapons have similar mechanics, which you can find starting on page 93. The terms used for ranged weapons have some similarities to melee weapons, such as rate of fire, number of hands required, concealability, and cost. Where ranged weapons differ is on the skill used for the weapon attack, single shot damage, standard magazine, and the alternative fire modes or special features. Like with melee weapons, ranged weapons are broken down into generic weapon types without any specific brand names or classifications, giving game masters the freedom to come up with their own brand names for their setting. There are 3 different pistol options available: medium, heavy, and very heavy. All 3 use the handgun skill for attack rolls, and none of them have special fire modes or features. Medium pistols have a standard magazine of 12 rounds with a fire rate of 2 and a single shot damage of 2d6. Heavy pistols have a decreased magazine size, dropping from 12 to 8 rounds, but the damage output increases to 3d6, and it retains the ability to fire 2 shots in a single combat round. Very heavy pistols have the same magazine size as heavy pistols, 8 rounds per magazine, but their rate of fire drops to once per combat round. To compensate for the lower rate of fire, the damage is increased to 4d6, making it a potentially lethal strike. Both medium and heavy pistols can be concealed, but very heavy pistols cannot be concealed without modification. Submachine guns, or SMGs, are the next set of weapons, of which there are 2, the SMG and the heavy SMG. Both submachine guns use the handgun skill for attack rolls, and they both cost 100 Eurobucks to purchase. Both weapons also possess the options for auto fire and suppressive fire, which I'll get into in a later video when discussing how combat works in Cyberpunk Red. The key differences between the SMG and the heavy SMG are the magazine size, 30 for the SMG, 40 for the heavy SMG, the damage output, 2d6 for the SMG, 3d6 for the heavy SMG, and the concealability option. SMGs can be concealed, heavy SMGs cannot be concealed. The main reason for utilizing one of the SMG options instead of one of the pistol options is for the suppressive fire and auto fire abilities, which are not available for any of the pistol categories. Shotguns are the next category of ranged weapons, and the real distinction for this weapon is the ammo type, either shotgun shells or slugs. Shotguns are the first ranged weapon to make use of the shoulder arms skill for attack rolls. Shotguns usually require two hands to wield them, but certain cybernetics can change that. Shotguns are also not concealable weapons. The damage output of a shotgun is one of the highest for a non-heavy weapon at 5d6, but the magazine size is extremely limited, with only 4 slugs or shells in a magazine. Performance-wise, slugs act like bullets from other guns and can target enemies at range. Shotgun shells are used for spread attacks, meaning your character isn't aiming to hit a single target, but is trying to hit everyone within a 3-square cone in front of them. Shotguns are most useful when dealing with large crowds or when you're dealing with heavily armored enemies. The next type of ranged weapon is the rifles, and like the SMGs, it's broken up into 2 different options. Rifle stands in for your standard assault rifle analog, since it has the auto fire and suppressive fire features. Sniper rifles are just what they sound like, rifles used at long distances. Both rifles and sniper rifles use the shoulder arms, and they are two-handed weapons. Both deal the same amount of damage per shot at 5d6. The magazine size is the most telling difference between the two. Rifles have a magazine size of 25 bullets, whereas the sniper rifle only has a magazine size of 4, similar to the shotgun. Lastly, we get into the specialized ranged weapons. Bows and crossbows are two-handed weapons that utilize arrow ammunition and the archery skill for attack rolls. The arrows deal 4d6 damage per shot, and you're only able to make a single shot per combat round. Arrows have the distinction of potentially being tricked out for those who want to engage in some green arrow type shenanigans based on your game master's discretion. Grenade launchers and rocket launchers are the only ranged weapons that use the heavy weapons skill for attack rolls. Grenade launchers have a magazine size of 2, and they deal 6d6 damage to a small area based on the designated target area. Rocket launchers only have a magazine size of 1, and they deal 8d6 to a small area. What I mean by this is that when you make an attack roll, you aim for a spot on the game grid rather than an individual target. From that spot, every enemy within 2 squares in any direction can be affected by the explosive ammunition used by either the grenade launcher or rocket launcher. As it should be no surprise, neither type of weapon can be concealed. On page 95 of the core rulebook, there's a listing of some of the exotic weapons that can be found in the setting of Cyberpunk Red, along with their prices. Generally speaking, game masters should not allow their players access to any of the options that are of the expensive category or higher at character creation. The luxury and super luxury items should be far out of reach of your crew of edge runners that are just starting off their careers on the edge, but there are options such as stun guns, stun batons, and such that can be available to the players at this stage of their lives. Armor is just as important a feature for your characters as their weapons, since without armor of any kind, they're not going to last very long in the dark future of Cyberpunk Red. Armor helps to soak up the damage from the attacks of your character's enemies, and in some cases prevent your character from taking any damage at all. Armor is also not distinctive from clothing in Cyberpunk Red. At this point in the dark future, practically every piece of clothing has some kind of armor weave built into it. So the descriptions for the types of armor are generic, listing instead the kind of protection and penalties associated with wearing it. Armor is also broken down as what covers the body and the head, with each one being a distinctive piece of armor that has to be purchased by a player character. Armor also doesn't stack, so you can't double up and have one type of armor covering a second type. Just like with the ranged and melee weapons, there's a chart with different fields showcasing the armor types, their description, stopping power, armor penalty, and cost. Types is fairly straightforward as it's a generic title. Description gives you some idea of what the armor would look like or wear like on your character. Stopping power determines how much incoming damage the armor can absorb before your character starts losing hit points. The armor penalty covers how much of a detriment your character's stats will take by wearing this piece of armor. One thing to know is that the penalty for armor doesn't stack when you're wearing both head and body armor. That has a penalty. It's assumed that if you're wearing heavier armor types, you're wearing both head and body together for maximum protection. The armor types can be found on page 97 of the core rulebook. The most common type of armor a character will start off with is light armor jack, which is a combination of Kevlar and plastic mesh that's woven into the fabric of a given garment. Think the tactical armor found in the John Wick films from John Wick 2 onward. The main reason light armor jack tends to be favored is that it's relatively cheap at €100, there's no penalty assessed, and the stopping power of 11 means that some weapons aren't going to be able to generate enough damage to penetrate. Leathers and Kevlar are also a good choice if your character doesn't want to spend too much money, but the stopping power for both of those options is much smaller. 4 for leathers, 7 for Kevlar, respectively. Heavy armor jack, flak, and metal gear armor types should not be available to players at character creation simply from a price standpoint. The heavy penalties to reflex, dexterity, and move stats make these items cumbersome for characters that are just starting out, even if the protection offered is substantial. The other factor to consider is that in Cyberpunk Red, fashion and how your character looks is often just as important, if not more so, than how much protection your gear provides. Now, on to how your character gets their weapons and armor at character creation. Much like with skills and stats, armor and weapons have street runner, edge runner templates based on the role your character is playing. The chart with the templates can be found on page 98 of the core rulebook. With each role, there are optional weapons that are made available, which you would pick one or the other. For example, if your player is going to be a media, they would choose between carrying a heavy pistol or a very heavy pistol with 50 rounds of basic ammunition for that respective type of weapon. A lawman character could potentially start off with a bulletproof shield or smoke grenades at character creation. The Street Rat Edge Runner templates for the different roles is a good starting point if your players have been using the templates to build their characters up to this point. In addition to the items listed in the templates, characters built using Street Rat and Edge Runner templates also get €500 for additional equipment or just to hang on to. I'll be covering the complete package option for weapons and armor in a separate video. In my next video, I'll be discussing the outfit options for player characters, which includes the gear your character would need for just day-to-day survival and their clothing options. Once again, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the bell icon to get notified when I drop new content. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment as well. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.